Welcome to this week's Check-In with the Doctor. I am your host, of course, Chris White, and I have a real treat for everyone this week. I'm joined by Mr. Garin Hess, the CEO of Consensus, CEO and founder of Consensus. He's the author of the book Selling is Hard, Buying is Harder, and he's just coming off the heels of an unbelievably successful Demofest last week and has given up his precious time to spend a few minutes with us. Garin, thank you so much for being here. Welcome, and how are you, sir?
Thank you, Chris. It's so wonderful to be able to talk to you today, and I'm excited to be on the show, so thanks for having me, and doing great. I'm actually hailing you from Sedona, Arizona. After Demofest last week, I just had to get away, and I've come down here with a friend. We're doing some mountain biking and hiking and things, and it's just gorgeous out here.
Man, well, so first of all, I have to say, I have a touch of envy. I've been to Sedona. It's absolutely beautiful. And it looked like maybe you were in a hotel room, which also was a bit of a foreign image for many of us. So I really appreciate you taking some time out of your getaway. Incidentally, and we never know who's going to be joining. It looks like we've already had Robert Key sign in and say hello. Robert, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining in. If anybody else joins in, please don't hesitate to say hello. Of course, if you have any questions for Garin, I invite you to ask. So Garin, before we get into really anything, in the unlikely event that we have somebody who might not know who you are, do you mind just taking a minute and introducing yourself a little bit more elaborate than I just did?
Absolutely. And just because it's me and this is an informal session, I'm going to say I'm first and foremost a husband and father. I've got 3 kids, my wife, Kristen, and I love my family. From a professional standpoint, founder and CEO of Consensus. I'm kind of a startup guy, have been for the last 20 years, and just always been in the technology space. We may get into this, but I've played roles as kind of acting sales engineer. I ended up training sales engineers, even though I wasn't officially a sales engineer at the time in a software company, just because I was the product expert and they didn't know what they were doing. And it was just that's really what started me on a lot of this. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk today because I'm really passionate about the sales engineering profession, about the challenges we're facing, about also just sales in general, the approach that we should be taking in this digital era to helping the buyers get what they need.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a bit of a roundabout introduction, but hopefully that gives you what you need. Anything else you want to know about me?
well, and I do. I'm eager to get into the buyer enablement, and you and I have spent a little bit of time together. I spent some time with one of your sales folks recently, and he even opened my eyes brighter to some of the challenges that folks have out there. But I would like to just hear a little bit more about your background, talk a little bit about your experience as a sales engineer, some of the folks that you were training, some of the challenges that either you yourself faced or some of the sales engineers that you work with faced, sort of that led to where you are now.
Yeah, it's kind of a long journey. I'm not sure, super interesting, but I'll share some of it. And just so people understand what Consensus is, in case you've never come across Consensus, right? It's intelligent demo automation software that helps you scale the pre-sales function. So the way this kind of works is the pre-sales team builds out reusable interactive video demos that then sales sends and tracks, and this allows the prospects, to come to conversations more educated, ready to talk specifics. So as some teams are able to double their pre-sales productivity, you're able to give a better buying experience, sales cycles get reduced. And really from an individual practitioner standpoint, the goal is to equip the sales engineer with technology that allows them to do more of what they do best, like less of the repetitive demos, more of the highly technical deep dives, solution consulting, solution architecting, all of that. So that's kind of where we are today. That's what Consensus does. So if we back up and talk about where all this started, out of college, I started working for a company up in Washington State, and they did debt collection software for collection agencies, collection governments. Agents or branches of government like the IRS and different things, which
Interesting.
not a very sexy space to be in, or popular space, but I guess somebody has to have software to run that sort of thing.
For sure.
So I was working for them, and they had no product training to speak of. I got hired to be an installer at the time. It's like, hey, you're gonna install on-premise software. And there's no training. They literally gave me 2 manuals that were this thick,
Amazing.
1,500 pages each. Yeah. Very detailed technical manuals, which was appreciated. They said, right, this is your onboarding, and they put those on my desk and said, we'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Good luck. Go get it, right?
And I literally had to sit there and read those. And I was so frustrated with the experience that I became committed to learning the product better than anybody at the company, because I thought, I soon came to find out that nobody really knew the product inside and out. And 2, they had no training to speak of. So I was really passionate about, no one's going to have this crappy experience that I just had.
Yeah.
And so I started these quiz show kind of things, these knowledge bowls. We'd get the customer support teams to come down, and I would stand up and say, okay, here's the question. Do you know the answer to this? Team A. Okay, how about team B? Nope, you missed it. We had, one of my favorite things is we had this thing called a firing squad, where the opposite team would stand up in front of the other team with rubber bands, and the person would have to stand up there. And if they couldn't answer the question, then I'll shoot them with rubber bands, you know? And so we had this, I so wanted this never to happen, that people had to just sit down and read these manuals, that I got deeply embedded in the product and training and things. And then I was an installer. And then because I became known as the guy who knew the product really well, lo and behold, I started getting pulled in on sales calls, right?
Of course.
And they didn't officially have sales engineers at the time. Anyway, at some point they did assign, I don't know if they had somebody right then. Anyway, at some point they did assign sales engineers. And so I was in charge of training them. So some of the sales engineers were just salespeople that were more product oriented. And then some of them were people from the product team that kind of came over. Ironically, because I just had gotten into it, I ended up knowing more about it. So that's kind of where this all started, from a sales engineering standpoint, and seeing how the demos and sales work. And this was a good 25 years ago. So anyway, fast forward to about 2010. I was on it was my last startup. We were focused at that time on interactive e-learning authoring software. And we had a ton of leads, and we couldn't figure out who we could demo for. Everybody wanted a demo, and we're like, I don't know, should we just say yes to everybody? Well, that doesn't make sense, but we can't say no to some people. So how do we deal with this, right? And one time I jumped in to help the sales team, and I did 6 demos back to back. And by demos, this was actually product demos, back to back in a row, hour after hour. And when I finished, I was exhausted, and I thought, man, I just did the same thing over and over. And all I did was kind of change things based on some questions, right? Some light discovery, and I changed things around. And I thought, there's got to be some better way to do this, right? So that was when the problem just kind of hit me like a lightning bolt. I was like, this is a huge problem. And I started looking around for software to help me, and there was nothing out there really that could do it. We tried solving that problem back there at my last startup by, hey, let's record some Camtasia videos and put them on YouTube, or take the WebEx recording and send it out. But those are just woefully deficient. And so that's kind of where all this started, and led to the founding of Consensus in 2014. So.
And when you guys first started, it wasn't named Consensus, right?
Yeah, I know. I hate to say this name now, because we try to make sure everybody knows we're not this name anymore. But I'll say it just for the purposes of good history, right? We started out as Demo Chimp, and I thought it was a pretty cool name.
I mean, it reminds me of MailChimp.
Right. Well, that was the idea. Like, get some
leverage
off of Chimp. There's some automation connotation there. It's a Demo Chimp, so kind of should. But I had this great conversation in 2015. The first time we were talking to SAP, and it was this guy named Stefan, and he was over sales development reps in somewhere in Europe, I think. And I don't do a good German accent, but he was talking to me, and he's like, I really like what you have, Garin, but it's been a long time since we have had software that a monkey could demo. And I'm just like, oh man, this is, and then he said, he goes, in all seriousness, he says, there's no way I could go get a service order past my head of revenue with the name Demo Chimp on it. And then not only that, but we had people actually getting offended. They're like, how dare you? Solution consultants are so important, and you're demeaning the industry, and we're high experts. And I'm like, I know the reason we call it Demo Chimp is because the software does all the dumb stuff that you don't have to do, so you can do all the expert stuff.
Right.
Right. But it didn't come across that way to some people. So,
right.
And then we had this epiphany as we saw what was happening with our software and engaging different stakeholders, that it's more than just doing demos. It's about engaging all these other stakeholders, right, in the buying experience. And then that led to this rebranding to Consensus, as you're thinking, how do we engage all the different stakeholders, the buyers in the buying group, in a personalized way, bring them to the conversation. And so the name Consensus just seemed to make a lot of sense, because you're trying to win that general agreement across the group that you should make a decision or address the problem, whatever it is that they're dealing with.
And so I think that's such an important point. And I'll be the first to admit, I first discovered you guys as Demo Chimp. And then when you,
a while back.
That's a while back. And then when you made the jump to Consensus, it wasn't immediately obvious to me. How did you go from a demo software to a brand called Consensus? But the point is that the process of selling now is to a great deal building consensus, and therein is the leap to the book, which is selling is hard, buying is harder. And again, I don't think to sort of the naked eye or the uninformed eye, it's obvious that book was written by someone who runs an intelligent demo automation company. So for anybody who might be listening now or in the recording, draw that lineage from demo automation to buyer enablement.
So also in 2015, I sat down one day and thought, I was frustrated with the buying experience. Buying enterprise software is too hard. And it's difficult, it's slow, and it's complicated. And I thought it shouldn't be this way. And I started thinking about how Amazon and other retailers are trying to make retail buying easier. And I thought, well, what would be the ideal buying experience from a buyer if I wanted to buy enterprise software? And I spent the whole day just mapping this out, actually wireframing this whole buyer enablement software vision that included demo automation. Because the reason demo automation, or demos, and not just demo automation, but demos in general, are so important is because research shows that buyers, more than anything else they want from vendors, is they want demos. In fact, the top three things are demos, social proof, and ROI assessment or calculation kinds of helps. But demos are at the top. And not only that, but Gartner recently published research that says that, I don't have the quote in front of me, but it basically says the reason they want to talk to sales engineers more than anyone else, buyers do, because they want to see things that are not easily faked. That was the quote, things that are not easily faked. And as much as we would like to fake things sometimes, as sales engineers, we're in a position where we're demoing live, and it's our job. If anyone's going to fake, we expect the sales rep to do it, not us. And that's why there's this great trust with the sales engineer. And And so I was sitting there thinking, what is the ultimate buying experience? And without going into all the details on that, because that could be its own or that's really what the book is about,
Yeah, that's
right?
a book.
The book is about what's the ultimate buying experience and then how do you provide it, right? And a good demo experience is just one aspect of it. But I mapped that out, and that also was at the time I was thinking about the name change, and I realized that what the world really needs is to change how enterprise software is purchased. Like the buying experience needs to fundamentally change. And I knew that demo automation was a big help to that, because as an example, in our sales engineering compensation and workloads study that we released last year, and it was actually reiterated the same this year, the median lag time between the time a buyer wants a demo and the time they get one, and this is only the median, is 1 week, right? How long do you wait before you learn about a product on Amazon?
Yeah.
Like you don't wait. There's no waiting.
3 seconds comes to mind.
There's no waiting, right? Well, it's just ridiculous that you should have to wait that long as a buyer. And that's just the median. 20% of the industry said it was 2 weeks or more. I mean, that's just a horrible experience. And so if you think about just what do buyers need, and demo automation can help deliver that initial engagement. And again, to understand what I'm talking about here, you want to get into this concept that I often talk about with the 6 demo types, because we're not talking about giving them an hour-long deep technical dive. If they just barely engaging with you, it's automating, it's making available instantly those early stage, what I call vision, micro, and standard or qualifying demos, right? So, but as I sat down to think about how do we make buying enterprise software easy, pleasurable, and fast, rather than hard, complex, and slow.
And unpleasant.
And unpleasant. And that's really where I started thinking, well, what is the right buying experience? And so in the meantime, as a CEO, I've been selling our own software all this time, right? And I continue to keep my hand on the sales helm with a few deals all the time, because I like to keep my ear to the ground. And I started coming up with these hypotheses. Well, if I was a buyer, like I just did this buyer empathy. If I'm a buyer, here's what I want. I want a demo when I need it. I want a personalized. I want to drill down further if I want to. I want some social proof. I want an ROI calculator. I want personalized FAQs. I want personalized social proof, and I want to be able to talk to references or whatever it might be, right? I kind of laid this out. I even imagine the software, which is really beyond the scope of our own company. But and then I started employing these techniques in my own sales interactions. And here's what I found is that my own experience, my own close rate went from about 38% to over 70%.
Wow.
And wildly enough, now the CEO is always going to have maybe a bigger close rate, because I don't know, maybe not always, but
CEOs just have they have the credit, that's the street cred.
People like to know they're talking to the CEO, and so maybe they're more likely to buy. But to see my own close rate go from 38 to over 70%, I was just like, whoa, that's interesting. And not only that, but I started laying out, here's the framework that I think works the most effectively. What I found was, when I tried to do the selling, it didn't go very well. But when I focused on enabling the champion that I was working with to do the selling, everything went better. And so then I started thinking, well, what's the best way to enable the champion to do the selling for you? Because they're going to anyway. Here's the thing that most salespeople, and whether it's you're in pre-sales or in the sales side of the house, don't realize is the champion is going to go sell for you, whether you like it or not. And they're either going to do a bad job or they're going to do a good job. And most of the time, they're going to do a bad job. Why? Because they don't know what they're talking about. And so they're going to go knock on the door of the CEO or whoever the next person is that they need to talk to try to make progress, because they're enthused. They're the change makers. They're going to go make everything happen. And they go to their colleagues and they knock on their door and they say, hey, look at this. Here's the big problem, right? And the CEO or whoever it is says yes. And they say, well, here's the solution I found. And they get all excited and they say it however they're going to say it. And it's usually not the right way. And because of that, then whoever that leader is says, well, that sounds a little weird. And have you thought of this and this and this and this and this? And they're like, no, I haven't. And now they come back with their tail between their legs and they're talking to you as the sales team. And they're going, so I went and talked to them and it didn't go so well. And that happens so often that it's just the wrong way to do it. If you know they're going to do it, and they have to do it because you hardly ever get access to all of those stakeholders, then you need to equip them. And so what does that put you in the position of? It's the buying coach rather than seller, right? Who knows the buying process better, you or the buyer?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
I say this all the time. We sell for a living. Our customers don't buy for a living for the most part, right? That's not their job.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, if you're talking to procurement or something, that's one piece of it. Exactly. So that stakeholder does, but your champion, let's just say you're selling CRM, to take a generic product. Well, how often is the champion you're talking to going to buy CRM? Probably once in their entire career, maybe twice if they happen to need to do it twice, heaven forbid. And so they don't really know what they're doing. But you have guided and shepherded these buyers along the journey, dozens. And if you look at your whole team collectively, hundreds and thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of times, depending on how big your org is. Yep. And so in the hive mind of your organization, you have all this knowledge about how the buying experience should be to be successful.
Right.
But have you put it together in a buying experience framework so that every sales engineer and every sales rep can help the buyer along the journey in the most effective way possible? So that's really what that whole book is about. And in a lot of ways, my vision exceeds my grasp, meaning I wish I could build the software that I imagined, because every time I buy enterprise software, I just think, I wish it were that way that I thought of in 2015. But the reality is that, first things first, demo automation being the most important function, or demos in general being the most important function of the buyer experience, that's what we're focused on. But the book itself is broader than that. Yeah.
Well, and I just have to reflect on a couple things. First of all, I can't tell you how refreshing it is to just hear this very, very honest and relaxed sort of reflection on the process and the journey that you've been through, and how you've gotten to where you've gotten, and the company and really this platform, and you've solved so many problems on the way. In fact, I wanted to reflect back to you. There were 3 or 4 times that you used the word frustration, starting with the 2 1,500-page books that were dropped on your desk.
I'll never forget that.
That I'm seeing here is you see a frustration or a problem or a deficiency, and you solve it. And to me, like, there's such a lesson to be learned there, really, for everyone, especially people who are younger. I'm going to have my 20 something sons listen and say, whenever you face a frustration in business, that's an opportunity to find a better way.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. So, I mean, I had an employee once early on in Consensus say, Garin, how is it? Because my last startup was, to a certain degree, successful. It was acquired by a public company, and there was a successful outcome. Thank goodness. I mean, I made a believer out of my wife, and that one was bootstrapped, and we got out of debt finally. And so, I was so grateful for that. But so this employee asked me, so how do you come up with such good ideas? And I had kind of 2 responses, and one of them was very much what you said, which is, the only ideas I care about are the ones the pain points that are so painful that I have enough energy to get through all the challenges inherent in startup life to try to solve them. Because it's like Elon Musk said, he said, it's like eating glass. And I think that's the best description of being a startup founder as any I've ever heard. It's like eating glass. And if you're not passionate enough about solving the problem, then you can't get through that. And so you identify a problem that you really is painful, right? So it's really the seedbed of pain that causes, at least for me. Now, some people maybe just get excited about anything, but for any good idea. But for me, the ideas I'm inherently interested in. The other thing I told him was, it's not the ideas that count. ideas are kind of a dime of a dozen. We can all sit down and write a list of things we're frustrated about pretty fast, and even maybe come up with ways to potentially solve them. But the idea isn't mean squat until you take action. And so Warren Buffett once said, if I have to choose between two leaders, CEOs or different companies, I'm going to choose the one that has a bias towards action. And I think that when I heard that, I thought that describes how I think about how to be successful. Is you've got to take action on things. Ideas are something, but there are very few people. Like, everyone has ideas, very few people actually take the action. So
yeah.
I think it's both of those things. You feel a pain, frustration, have the idea, then you got to take action about it.
Well, and I think that's actually incidentally, let me pause. As I said earlier, we never know who we have on, and I don't actually have visibility into how many people are in. So if we do happen to have anybody on who cares to say hello and or ask Garin any questions, I invite you to do so. Otherwise, Garin, this recording obviously will be available to anybody to capture it after the fact.
Sounds good.
And as I say, I just love the sort of the transparent sort of thoughts that you're sharing. They resonate with me so much. You mentioned action and action versus idea. And I think frankly, for a lot of people in sales, we seem to get people excited, but sometimes it's hard for them to take action, or it's hard for us to inspire them to take action. So, my guess is that you probably see some of this as well. People probably hear about consensus, see a demo, and they think it's a great idea, but some of them might be reluctant, right? Might be reluctant. Why do you think people might be reluctant even to do something like demo automation, which seems so obvious? And what might you tell those people who aren't sure they're ready to take action?
Great question. And the whole area of how do you get people to take action is quite interesting. But as far as it pertains to demo automation, one of the hesitations people have is they don't want to be automated out of a job, right? I mean, this is typical with any automation, whether you're automating car manufacturing or whatever it might be. And it's a valid concern because as AI rises and different things, people are worried that, can we automate the entire sales function, including sales engineering at some point, right? And this even came up at Demofest last week, but and my answer is, I don't know if one day all this will be automated. It's very hard for me to imagine that you could actually make a really good enterprise software purchase, at least on a large scale, in an automated way. Small business purchases definitely, but what I usually try to emphasize in this situation is we're not trying to automate the sales engineer. We're trying to automate the aspects of what sales engineers have to do that they really hate, which is repetitive Harbor Cruise demos. I mean, Absolutely. If you don't want to automate that, then you're hanging on to a job for the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is, in the Scaling PreSales ebook and webinar that I put together, I have an image that shows all the different things that sales engineers are asked to do, and it's staggering. There's like 15 different things, from product knowledge to RFPs to POCs to 6 different types of demos, to training new guys, to hopping on customer support calls. I mean, it's
webinars,
insane.
Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and so the reality is that these repetitive demos and many of these other tasks cause a morale issue, and a lot of sales engineers get really frustrated. They're really intelligent, highly skilled, deeply expert at the product, and great at solution engineering, discovery, and architecting solutions, and yet they're stuck on half of their demos are these repetitive demos. Not to mention that the qualification of demos is another big problem. If half your time spent on repetitive demos and 30 to 50% of those demos are unqualified, I mean, that is pretty darn frustrating. So the reality is, what we're trying to do is automate the stuff that sales engineers should not be doing, because Okay, a monkey could do that part. And
Right.
the automation can do that part. What automation cannot do is have a really deep discovery. Automation can have it can help with discovery, but having those deep engaging conversations, imagine going in discovery, having some basic understanding of the product on the customer's part, as well as having some basic discovery information about them so that you can dive into all these specifics. And then you spend more and more of your time on these key activities of POCs, solution architecting, deep dive technical demos, right? So an analogy I like to put on it is sales engineer without demo automation is like Iron Man without his Iron Man suit, right? You can still do a lot. You're not changing who you are. It's just how much more you can do, right? And so we're really trying to be additive to the sales engineer rather than automate them away. But that is one of the concerns. I'd say the other concern we get is just, wow, how do we have to load your software with consensus software with product videos. That seems like really difficult to make product videos. And we used to think so too. In fact, we used to have this assumption that you had to have highly produced motion graphics videos that had all the bells and whistles, a voice narrator, some music in the background, and animation. And because, hey, this is your company you're putting out there in a digital format, kind of the retail storefront sort of mentality. And what we discovered instead through a series of events, which I won't go into at the moment, is that it's just the opposite. So we did this study, and I think it was 2018, where we took our own demo that was highly produced, motion graphics and all this that I just described. And then we took the exact same outline and did it without the same amount of production value. And we just outlined it and then just spoke to it without actually having it scripted and narrated and all this stuff. Same content, triple the engagement, took 1/5 the time to build. Wow. And we went, whoa, okay. At the same time, there was a team over at Oracle that was doing kind of the same thing. They started using consensus and they said, hey, we want to, in our first videos that we built had music and stuff, and we weren't getting the engagement, the sharing we wanted. So we thought maybe we should just try a demo video as if they were sitting next to the sales engineer.
Yeah.
And they said instantly sharing shot up, all this engagement shot up. And that goes back to what Gartner said, right? They want things that are not easily faked. And this is what we've learned, is that the more production value you put on it, kind of counterintuitively, but it is intuitive once you hear it. But the more production value you put on it, the less they trust you.
Yeah.
So the more you're just authentic, we just call it authentic or genuine video, the more they're going to trust you.
Yeah.
And so
it's interesting. I mean, Amanda Bertucci, Amanda, thanks for joining.
Hey, Amanda.
She nailed it, right? People buy from people.
Right?
At the end of the day,
not a script.
and incidentally, just as you started talking about what the sales engineers experience, Robert actually asked, how do you feel the SE role changes? And then he followed that with, Garin read my mind. So you answered him without even seeing the question. But I'll make both a plug for Demofest and a plug for my talk at Demofest, because you're touching on both. You may recall my topic was automate where you can.
Yeah.
Elevate where you cannot.
Yeah, that's a great title. Yeah.
And by the way, authenticity was one of, I had 10 things, and I said we can authenticate, but we can't automate authenticity, right? We can be creative with tools, but you can't automate creativity. Right? There's certain things that will always, to me, and I'm actually interested to get your opinion on this. Had a conversation with another friend of mine in the community last week. And I sort of had this, sometimes, not unlike this. By the way, this is what I love about the live sessions. Folks, in case you don't know, these are not scripted. I tell all my guests, we're going to get on and have a conversation and just see where we go. And I had a conversation last week. And it was one of those moments where I said something and I went, wait a minute, I need to grab that. And this is what I said. We were talking about demo automation. And I said, look, here's the reality. You can automate demonstrating software. That's pretty straightforward. But to me, it takes a human to demonstrate value. At the end of the day, value is personal. Value is in the eye of the beholder. It's not until what you were saying, I truly understand the individuals and the organization and the people at play, right? That I, as an individual, can really demonstrate the value in the right way, right? But demo automation enables me to uncover so much more information, right? And actually
engage them sooner.
The discovery process. Exactly.
And bring all of that, you bring the whole thing forward. Like the stuff that's normally stretched out over months, you end up pulling forward into the conversation so that you get into those meaty conversations that you are uniquely qualified to do sooner. Exactly. And that's what the buyer wants. That's the thing. That's what most people don't realize, is that's what the buyer wants. And it just helps facilitate it. I do think there's some value you can help portray the general value, but that personalized value and the trust ends up being a combination of that, however you are as a person, and responsiveness and just engaging them with sincerity and empathy and different things. And also just making sure that the buyers actually get what they need, because what builds trust the most for them is this guy or gal knows how to help me.
Exactly.
Buyers repeatedly say they don't care whether they talk to people or not. What they really want is help getting from point A to point Z, and however that works. Some of that can be automated. Some of it can be lead them through it. Other parts cannot be. Yep. But the person who knows what can and what cannot and helps them get through B, C, D, E, and F, and so on easily and pleasantly is the one they're going to buy from all day long.
Completely. Well, and I'm reminded of so Sam McKenna, who runs #SamSales. She's another great sales trainer and author. She has a phrase, "Show me you know me." And isn't that great? And to me, she was one of my guests on the show a few months ago as well. Show me you know me. And the more I can do that throughout the entire buyer's journey, and by the way, we can automate learning more about our prospects and our customers, right? In what they're looking at. There were you've said so many things that I wanted to double click on, and that was one of them.
And if I could just mention the show me you know me thing. Gartner has this research where they asked, out of all the things that are most important traits of the sales team, it's personalization by industry and segment. And so you would, and again, that's show me you know me. You don't want to be pitched some pitch. I can't count the number of times somebody said, in fact, I've had this experience on even job interviews. So, we're relatively small. We're a startup. We're not a Fortune 500 company. Exactly. So if anybody in a job interview shows me, look at, this Fortune 500 model that I built, I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in sales. If you've got a case study for a mid-market and you're talking to an enterprise, it's not going to connect, and vice versa. And so, and this is one of the things I talk about in the book, is you've got to map out all the different personas, where they come in on the buying stages. And this map has got to be by industry, and if you've got different verticals, and it's got to be by industry, and it's got to be by segment. And you're going to have a lot of pieces of content that you're missing, because in the end, buyer enablement is ultimately about, you make it easier by helping them know how to get educated at the things they need and complete tasks at the stages they're in. And it's your key champions and these other stakeholders. So the more granular you can get, and I know it's a big job, and even at Consensus we're still working through it, but the more granular you can get. I mean, imagine if you're selling to retail, and it's retail, and they're a mid-market company with 1,000 employees. Well, imagine if you have a case study that's about retail from somebody with 800 employees, right? Yeah. And the same job title, like you're selling to the CRO. Well, if it's a CRO, if somebody, it's magic. If you don't have that, they're just like, So it has to do with demos, case studies, anything that you do, you need to try to personalize that to that level. Show me, you know me. I love that. I'm going to remember that.
Yeah.
So who was that said that? I need to give credit.
Sam McKenna. She's fantastic. McKenna. Hashtag right. Sam Sales. Yep. And cool. you can look back through my history, the log of LinkedIn Lives. She was episode 16, I think, this year. She's great. It's worth a listen. She's fantastic.
Awesome. Love it.
There's one more point that I just wanted to share real quickly. One of the aha moments for me was when I think I was actually talking. In fact, I think it was when I was talking to someone who Ed is. Anyway, I'll remember his name, but he's one of your customers.
Okay.
And he said honestly, Chris, demo automation has actually improved our discovery. And that was sort of an aha moment for me, is that demo automation actually enables discovery. And by the way, one of the things that I've been talking about is discovery in disguise, right? That first demo, a lot of times really is discovery in disguise.
Discovery, yeah.
Right?
You're saying the customer says, I want a demo. You say, okay. And then in the process,
to show you exactly.
Yeah, you discover. And this is the other thing that when I was coming up with demo automation solution that I realized is the demo experience, what we call the demo is traditional in sales engineering, is such a rich interactive exchange, and none of that data is captured. It's like this black box of data that goes nowhere, that's not coded anywhere. It's in the minds. It might be in the notes in the CRM, right, if you're lucky, but it's mostly in the minds of the sales engineer. And so how do we help automate even a little bit of that in a way that you can create unlock some of that discovery in the process? Because I totally agree that the demo is really a time and a moment in the buying experience where you learn so much about them.
And now my wheels are spinning. I mean, I think you're scratching a surface on probably where AI and automation is going, right? We will soon have tools that are intelligent enough to harvest that information out of the actual live demonstration. The last question I have for you, and then we're going to get into a bit of a lightning round, but is one of the other sort of most insightful observations that I made and sort of aha moments that I had recently when I was talking to one of your team members is when he shared with me sort of the percentage of a typical sale, the percentage that the seller owns versus the percentage that the buyer owns, or the percentage of a sale that the buyer actually, quote unquote, buyer does. I assume you know what I'm referring to.
Maybe there's a research piece that talks about all the 17%. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. So the buyers spend 17% of their time talking to the vendors, right? In the buying process and buying decision. So that means 83% of the time they're doing something else.
Yeah.
They're talking to the other stakeholders. They're selling internally. They're doing research and all this stuff. Yeah. And we have this concept of selling in the gaps, because you think you have this moment of time where you meet them, and then, it's at least a few days, if not a few weeks before you meet with them again. What are you doing in that time in between to make sure that you are in the conversation the way you should be? Back to your point about messaging, right? Because you have no idea what they're talking about or what they're doing in between. And there's a lot of different approaches in there, but we talk about selling in the gaps, and depending on the buying part of the buying journey, it's what type of demo do they need at that stage that they want to be sharing and engaging other stakeholders with.
Well, and the point, here's the way I heard it, and maybe I heard it wrong or correctly, but over 80% of the selling is actually not done by me, the salesperson or the
Yeah,
sales team.
exactly.
Like that's the
83%.
message.
Yeah.
And when I
Yep.
heard it that way, it just, for some reason,
It's a great
it hit
way
me
to
like
put
a ton
it.
of bricks, right?
Yeah.
Like over 80% of the selling's actually done by somebody who doesn't know, who doesn't do this professionally,
That's
right?
right.
So
Yeah.
we need to change the way
That
we
puts
think
high
about roles.
risk.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, who's in charge of the selling? The buyer
Yeah.
ultimately is in charge of the selling because they cannot make that decision themselves. They have to go rope in all these other stakeholders.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So again, going back to that buying coach thing, right? We have to, though I like to use sports analogies. So, on a basketball team, the coach can't score any points, just like a salesperson cannot close a deal. You get this thing like, I'm a closer. They can't close. Only the buyer can sign the contract.
Yeah.
Your buyer, your champion's basically your point guard or your team captain, or however you want to think about it. But you're the coach. You cannot score any points. So your objective is, how do I coach them so that they can get the rest of the group together and make some baskets, which is closing the deal essentially.
And I heard you say that last week in your talk when you said, who signs the contract, right? And it's not the salesperson. Right?
I know, and it's crazy because you think if they're the ones that sign the contract, the focus, all of the focus, 100% of our focus should be on them, not on us. And yet, where's all the money gone in the industry in terms of technology, sales enablement? It's like, that makes no sense. Like, okay, I'm not saying it doesn't make any sense at all, because salespeople do need to be enabled.
Yes.
But it's enabling the buyers. And even us, that we say we're enabling pre-sales. Well, how? Well, we're enabling them to enable the buyers, right? That's what ultimately we're trying to do, is enable the buyers through pre-sales.
Yep. So fantastic. So Garin, this has been just a delightful conversation. And again, I love the authentic nature. I do want to be respectful of your time. We're going to land this plane in 10 minutes. Actually, I have a 1 o'clock with a client, so I always have to be on time. But can I ask you 3 quick questions before we close? Are you open to a couple just quick questions? Okay.
Let's do it.
The first question: have you ever given a demo in your career that went particularly poorly? And if so, why?
Yeah, I mean, I've done many of these, and I hope earlier in my career, not later. But I'd say, one particular demo, and I'll share an anecdote that kind of goes along with it, which I think may be helpful in some way. This was in my last startup, and we were in a highly competitive environment. This was an e-learning authoring software, and there were 103 different authoring tools on the market. Wow. And we were the first collaborative online authoring platform, so that was our approach.
Yeah.
Yep, that was our differentiation. But we were bootstrapped. We didn't have a big development team, and it was tough to compete. And I was on a demo with a large customer, Fortune 1000 customer, and I was so obsessed with closing the deal that all I could think about, we were strapped for cash. I mean, it was a tough time. I wasn't taking a salary at the time. Hadn't taken a salary for like 5 months. And I'm doing this demo, and I'm just so obsessed with my own needs. I forgot to think about their needs altogether. And I just rattled through the demo, trying to point out every possible thing that I thought would be helpful.
All of your reasons.
All of my reasons for them. Yeah.
Right.
All of my reasons for them. And it fell flat. And we lost the deal to our main competitor. And I was and right after that, I had to get on a podcast with a podcaster and tell them how great, why we were such a good company. I was so demoralized. I wasn't sure how we could even get through that podcast. And I remember just thinking the whole time through that podcast, we got squat. We're gonna lose. Everything's going to pot. And it wasn't a year and a half later that we ended up, being acquired by a public company and having a very successful outcome for us. And we had ended up making a big impact in the industry. And so I guess the thing I'll mention that takeaways for me are, I can't remember who it was I quoted in my book, our need to help the customer has to be greater than our need to close the deal, right? Something like that. And that was what I forgot. And that's why it fell flat. And I don't know if we would have won that deal, but I am certain that it didn't help. And as I look back, I think most of the demos that I've done that have fallen flat are almost all wrapped up in that reason, one way or another. I think too much about myself. Celeste Headley, I quote her in the book, we listen too often with the intent to reply rather than to understand. Like, we're just too wrapped up in ourselves. So, the other thing I just wanted to mention, which is, I thought we were going to fail at that point. And just a lesson for anyone who's struggling with anything difficult, I'd say, negative emotions that come from either our own failures or our own difficult experiences, they're a bit deceptive because they don't really mean anything. Just because you feel negatively. That day I thought it was going to be a complete failure. It was one of those moments that I always look back on as just, one of the most horrible days of my last startup. But that's why it's called eating glass, because that was the day I was eating glass, but we got through it.
Yeah. That is a great story. And you're right. I'm affiliated with a company called Aslan Training and Development, and they have a foundational principle called other-centered selling.
Yeah. There you go.
And the best way to think of other-centered selling is it's the opposite of self-centered.
Self-centered. Yeah. It's buyer-centric. It's
Yeah.
It's the focus outside of you.
Yeah, I love it. All right, that's question number one. Question number two, reverse the roles and reverse the situation. Have you been on the receiving end of a demo that was particularly engaging and particularly compelling? And if so, what about it? And I could guess the answer, but what about it was so particularly compelling?
We recently brought on a vendor called Closed, CLOZD. I'll give them a shout out. They're a local startup in Utah doing win-loss reports, in-depth interviews. I was particularly impressed, and they're fantastic, by the way. But I was particularly impressed with the demo experience with them. One, because right out of the gate, they wanted to demonstrate value, because they said, first of all, they understood what my objections probably would be, because they said, now you've probably tried win-loss interviews and different things. You may have even used different vendors. What are you thinking? They asked a lot of questions.
I love it.
And then they said, we'd like to show you that we can do better than that by doing a sample interview for you. I was like, great. So, and now it's more complicated in enterprise software. You can't always just jump to, we'll do a POC.
Of course.
But I loved it kind of goes to the product-led growth concept, and their product is a service, but they immediately let us get in and see what the product was like. They showed us some sample reports, but that were redacted and things from other customers. But what really sold us was seeing how good their interview and their report was. And so it was a combination of just asking us lots of questions, and then demonstrating right away that they could overcome those concerns.
I love it. So they addressed the objections up front. They asked lots of questions, and then you go back and listen to what you just said. Demonstrated right away. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
They showed you the right. Okay.
They didn't talk very much.
Love it. I love it. Hey, this is a talk show, so you're supposed to talk a lot on this one. So the landing gear is officially out. The runway is in sight. Now, this is the toughest question usually for most people. And the challenge is really for me, because I'm going to have to respond as quickly as possible. But if you could ask me one question, what would it be?
Great question. What is the biggest concern on, if you're to take the sales engineering leaders that you talk to as a group, as a whole, as a tribe, what we'd say is the one prevailing question or concern on their mind right now?
Interesting question. Honestly, I'm going to give you two answers. One, I think it's scale. How do I scale my team? And it dovetails into the second part of the question, which is a very interesting, I think, challenge for the vendor community. Where do I invest? Because there are so many new vendors and so many new ways to automate their team, their organization, their function. They're trying to decide where, and they at least have budget now. They didn't have budget for decades.
For decades.
I think I think their biggest challenge is, what should I automate first, or where should I invest first? Because they have lots of options.
Yeah, I hear that a lot too. Obviously, it's the big problem
that's your space.
We're focused on. So interesting. Well, that's why there's so much activity right now in the industry.
Yep. So anyway,
thanks for sharing.
Garin, thank you so much. Any closing thoughts or comments from you, sir, before we wrap it up?
Well, thanks, Chris. It's been awesome. I would just encourage anybody who wants to learn more about Consensus to go to goconsensus.com. And even if you're not interested in demo automation, there's a wealth of pre-sales information out there. We have connected with a lot of people. There's the scaling pre-sales webinar series, the compensation workload report, different things. So I just encourage you to go out there, check out the resources section.
Fantastic. And Robert, thanks for your comments. Really enjoyed having you on.
Yeah,
and
thanks,
anybody
Rob,
who may have joined, thank you so much. I know we tend to go a long time, but Garin, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you visiting. Maybe if Demofest continues to be an annual thing, which I think it will, maybe I'll catch you the week after Demofest every year, and we'll have a conversation like this. Thank you so much. It's really been an absolute delight.
Likewise, Chris. Really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.
Take care, all.